The following program is a special presentation of the Big Ten Network, produced in association with the University of Iowa.
Hi, welcome to Conversations from the Iowa Writers Workshop. Michael Cunningham was born in Ohio and raised in California. He received his BA in English Literature from Stanford University and his MFA in Creative Writing from the University of Iowa. He is probably best known for his novel The Hours, for which he received both the Pulitzer Prize in Fiction and the PEN/Faulkner Award in 1999. He is also the author of the novels Flesh and Blood, A Home at the End of the World, and Specimen Days, and those are just some of his writings. He's received a Writers Award, a Guggenheim Fellowship, and a fellowship from the National Endowment for the Arts. Michael Cunningham, it's so great to have you here.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
So speaking of awards, I understand, well, first of all, you're here as part of the Ida Beam Distinguished Visitor Fellowship.
Yes, thank you, Ida Beam.
Ida Beam Distinguished Visiting Professor, and then you also recently got the Fairfax Award for Lifetime Achievement in the Arts. I'm thinking about these adjectives, lifetime achievement, distinguished professor. How does that feel?
It makes me feel even older than I actually am. I am, of course, it goes without saying, hugely grateful to George Mason University for giving me a Lifetime Achievement Award, along with people I idolize, Joyce Carol Oates and Tobias Wolff. The idea of receiving a lifetime recognition. Maybe it probably seems strange when you're 80. It certainly upsets my kind of ongoing conviction that I'm still 18.
You're still 18, yeah. Well, you've done a lot in these 18, since you were 18, right? I mean, you think about it, the amount of work that you've done since the beginning. I want to start from the beginning, or almost the beginning. We know you were at Iowa in 1978 to 80, but before that, I assume you came here for a reason. At what point did you decide you wanted to try your hand at this thing called writing?
I started writing when I was an undergraduate, without any particular conviction that I was any good at it. And I'm not just, it's not false modesty. I just love doing it. It was the first thing I'd ever done that I loved so completely, and I just graduated from college and kept doing it. And after a few years, I had been working in bars and writing in the mornings, kind of one of the classic things that a young aspiring writer does. And I found myself in this little beach town in Southern California, working in I was working in a bar in a Mexican restaurant at that point. It was not a glamorous or fabulous life, and I didn't really know anybody at that point in that little town in Southern California who had ever even read a book, much less could talk to me about my desires to write one. So with some trepidations, I applied to a couple of MFA programs and was accepted at Iowa and came here.
Yeah, fantastic. And then when you were here in the late 70s, again, you graduated in 1980. What was Iowa like for you? Had you been to this part of the country before?
I had never been to Iowa before. I loved it.
Yeah?
I loved Iowa City. I loved my 2 years here. They weren't always easy, of course. And when I was here, it was competitive. I hear that it's not quite so hard on students now as it was then, but it was a little bit of a piranha tank when I was here.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is, that was good for me in a way. It was difficult for me. It was difficult for all of us. But, I was this sort of hippie-ish kid from Southern California who had been sort of trying to write and unsure about whether writing fiction was even enough to do with a life. What about world hunger? I'm going to write down stories as the world collapses. And there was something about that very rigorous, competitive environment. There was something about having big, ugly fights in seminar rooms with people I knew to be intelligent and gifted that kind of woke me up, you know, that kind of made me feel like I was a member of this sort of quarrelsome SWAT team, and that we were all engaged. I spent, it was 2 years in a place where everyone agreed that nothing could possibly matter more than writing a beautiful paragraph.
Right, right.
And that made a huge difference to me.
I had a neat opportunity. I was asked to come back to my high school and present to juniors and seniors. I start out by showing pictures of Halo 3, Half-Life 2, these video games, and that's something you can relate to, and that's cool, and that's fun, but what's missing? So my pitch to students starts with that. It's just the skin, but what's going on underneath? I want to know how and why you move the way you do. Santos is a complete virtual human. And one of our main tenets initially was we want the whole body. We don't want to just do the muscles. We don't want to just do vision. We want the total package. And Santos is the total package. One of the things that's critical to what we're doing is prediction. The idea of the apple, when the apple fell and hit Newton, he didn't go around dropping every single apple. He said, well, what is that equation? What's the mathematical model that makes this happen? Okay? Then if I know that, I can apply it to all apples. So what's the mathematical model that makes people happen? I mean, that's cutting edge stuff. Now, if you're doing this prediction, you're predicting posture, motion, muscle activity, and there's not a whole lot of people doing that prediction, how do you know it's right? So we have some real people do that and compare them. Once we've validated that hypothesis, we don't have to check it every time because we know the fundamentals are right. In the long term, I mean, if this is really an intuitive, easy-to-use product, you wake up and maybe this thing could help you diagnose a problem you're having. I get a backache when I vacuum. You could use Santos to vacuum and see what are the torques in his joints. And if only my vacuum were 6 inches higher, I wouldn't have that problem. We could use this as a teaching tool. I mean, you hate science, you're in high school, totally turned off, and here's Santos, and you're flying through his body. I mean, that doesn't turn you on to science, nothing does.
We just had an exhibit here in which there was a documentary, a little short documentary called A License to Write, and I thought that was a very apt title because I felt like for many of the people who spoke in that documentary, and these were workshop students and alumni, they said, this place gives you permission to think these crazy. Right, yeah. You know, it's like you got the little tattoo, that you get where it says that you're.
It's true. I think it's one of the things that I'm not teaching right now, but I've taught for years, and it's one of the things I always talk to my students about. The sort of under-recognized sense of shame, embarrassment that you can feel as a young writer. Like it feels presumptuous. It feels embarrassing.
Yeah, and here, it's not just the workshop, but also Iowa City in general. Definitely now with Writing University, but when you were there, with writers walking down the street, and you pass by and somebody's working on whatever their next work is. It is kind of an oasis, isn't it?
Well, that's part of what's so great, I think, about the program at Iowa is you are, by definition, a member of the community. You can't help but be a member of community. It's not like, there's a great program at Columbia where I taught for years. But when the workshop was over, everybody vanished into Manhattan. Yeah. And here, for better and sometimes for worse, these are your people. Yeah. This is your community. This is who you are living with and fighting with and having affairs with. Right. Well, I didn't, but some people did. And spending all your time with. Right. And exactly. there's nothing like that out there. There is no Paris in the 20s. No. There is no bohemian quarter of any city where the poets gather at night to discuss sonnets and the future of the novel. Right. This is about the closest thing I know.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, I have to say, and still, after all these years. Something you mentioned about this place being hard for you. Now, I know when I was here, I found I came not thinking, I didn't have a huge literature background, and I felt very underread when I came here. And one of the best things about my education here was that I felt like I became a much better reader. Now, there was recently a Newsweek article with you where you talk about some of the books that you enjoy. Obviously, Mrs. Dalloway is a big one, which we'll come to in a second.
Right.
But I thought it was interesting what you said about books that you revisited but were disappointed by.
Oh, yeah.
You mentioned the books by
yes.
C.S. Lewis, which
Yes.
I had the same experience. I wanted to bring that up because that's the set of books that, Chronicles of Narnia and some of the other things he wrote. I loved those when I was a teenager. And then after I went through the workshop and came out and I started rereading some of these things, I'm like, oh, I was kind of disappointed.
I'm always a little reluctant to badmouth any writer, living or dead, in a magazine like Newsweek. But yes, in fact, forgive me, Ghost of C.S. Lewis.
Yeah, I know, me too.
Yeah, I mean, I was so enchanted by those books as a kid, and then and the prose is clumsy, and the Christian allegory is sort of heavy-handed and a little creepy.
I didn't see that before, but now I see. But again, this is all part of our education.
Well, sure, and there should be books that transport you at 15, and then don't seem like much of anything at 30.
Yeah.
That's the way it ought
That's
to
just
be.
how it goes,
Yeah.
Now, in terms of getting you launched out here in this lifetime career that you've had so far, your first major novel, A Home at the End of the World, was based on a short story called White Angel that appeared in the New Yorker.
Yeah.
And it was, what I love about this story, I mean, well, there's, of course, it grew from there, the novel grew from the story, but that there's a pivotal event that I'm not going to go into, but that was based on a real event. And I think about resonance and how writers get their material, and where it comes from, that something like that could resound so strongly, and again, I'm not describing it, but that it could grow this novel. Did you find yourself when you were writing this novel kind of being pushed along by this event, or were you, I guess what I'm asking you is how you grew the novel from that short story?
Sure. The story involves a sort of very unexpected, violent death, and it's the older brother of this kid who kind of is the much worshipped older brother, and something terrible happens to him, which is. I didn't have a brother, but I was something. I knew a kid who had a terrible accident when I was much younger, and I honestly am not sure where novels come from, but I think that awful thing that happened to that poor boy so many years ago, and that sense of terrible loss that all of us who had been his friends. Felt did sort of push me to try to write a novel about a profound and complicated friendship. Love comes in so many forms, and love rocks, and love rules, and love will be here when we're all dust. Right. And it comes in so many forms, and I've always been a little curious about the fact that romantic love accounts for about 99% of the literature.
Yeah, isn't that something?
Yeah. And then the other 1% is the story of heroic mothers who sacrifice for their children.
Right, exactly.
But I just feel like, but what about friendship? What about and any other kind of love you can
Families.
name? It feels yeah.
Iowa doctors on the Flying Hospital, studying nature in the outdoor classroom.
It's just a total learning experience and marvelous.
A digital human with real results. Dance Marathon's record-breaking year.
It was an emotional roller coaster.
And a fast, fun way to get to the game.
It's all black and gold. You can't miss it.
On Iowa Magazine.
How do you recognize a prestigious university? They're the ones that have earned distinction for academic excellence. They're known for having rigorous standards and for professors who are tops in their field. Great schools expect only the best from their students and deliver nothing but their best to the world. The University of Iowa offers students a world-class education. For over 160 years, we've earned our place among America's great schools. The University of Iowa, Be remarkable.
Let's get ready now for the
Hell Week. It's craziness.
We've got to teach drill faster than we've ever had to teach it before.
This is probably one of the hardest jobs we've ever had to do.
Hey, if you don't know pregame by tomorrow, then you won't march pregame.
Just being part of something that's larger than yourself.
Friendships are made here and kept for a long time.
Pocket Marching Band is bigger than anything I've ever been a part of.
This is the greatest college experience you can have.
What makes a university great? At the University of Iowa, the numbers tell the story. The University of Iowa, be remarkable.
I'm kind of leaping ahead here to Specimen Days only because of the fact that you have made these people who are, again, I think of it as a novel that kind of shifts these relationships all over, but at the same time there's this common thread of love and connection that they're going through. So let me now back up again to your major work, which was The Hours. And now, speaking of a book that influenced you, this book, for those people, those few people who don't know, that this book was, as you call it, a riff on the novel Mrs. Dalloway, which you read at the age of 15 and can say that is like the seminal novel of your life that made that inspired you to be a writer?
Well, I certainly cashed in big on that one.
You did all right, you know? You did all right.
No other novel has paid off for me the way Mrs. Dalloway did, that's for sure.
I tell you, and you'd had a couple of novels under your belt at that point. Now, my question is, what made you decide to take it on? Because seriously, I read this book and I'm thinking, man, and I feel this way about Specimen Days as well. How did you have the nerve? I mean, that's my honest, because a book that's still venerated by others, not just, but a lot of people love Virginia Woolf. And then to actually go into Virginia Woolf's head and try and show this day in 1922 or 23 when she's trying to work on this, what made you decide to dive in and take that on?
Well, for one thing, I mean, I think if you're any use at all as a writer, you have to have the nerve. You have to take the risks. You have to be willing to go down in big blue flames. Otherwise, what good are you?
Right.
What's the point of you? We already have more books than we can possibly read in a lifetime. If you're not willing to push it in some way, I'd wanted to do something with or about Mrs. Dalloway for so many years, and I kept thinking, I'm not ready to stand too close to Virginia Woolf. I don't have the facility yet. Yeah. I'm not talented enough yet. I'm not smart enough yet. And at a certain point I realized, I'm never going to feel talented enough or smart enough. You never feel fully qualified for the task at hand. So you might as well just go ahead and do it.
Is this like parallel to having children? You know how they say that you're never going to be ready, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, I think it's very much the same
thing. So you
thing.
might as well just
you're
dive
never
in.
Going to be ready. So just go ahead and do it.
And it's fantastic. I wanted to talk about teaching real quick because you said you're not teaching now, but you did teach at Brooklyn College. And
yes, in Columbia before that. Yeah.
In Columbia before that. What kinds of goals did you have for your students in your classes? Did you have a particular, what did you want your students to come away with?
Well, my singular desire for all of them was that they reinvent literature and take it someplace it's never been before, though of course hardly anybody ends up doing that. Yeah. My main desire, I think, with all of my students was to do what I could to help them find a voice that was uniquely theirs and the stories that only they could tell, which involved as much unteaching as it did teaching.
Yeah.
I probably spent as much time trying to talk my students out of sort of established things they had found their way into as I did trying to teach them new things.
Yeah. Did you have particular books that you recommended for them or stories that they would read? I
was constantly recommending books and stories to them, but different books and different stories for different
needs.
students. Yeah. No, I actually came to feel like a sort of literary psychopharmacologist after a while, and I would say, okay, you read this, this and this, you read that.
Yeah. You need to learn about plot, so you need to read this.
Yeah. Sometimes it's writers who are doing something like what you're trying to do. Sometimes it's writers who are doing something completely different from what you're trying to. You kind of do this by instinct, by the seat of your pants.
Exactly. Yeah. Enough experience with teaching, you start seeing that. You start seeing how you can speak to an individual student.
I think it's like doing any job for long enough. Your instincts sharpen up. You begin. You're after 10 years of it, you're better than you were at the beginning. At sort of knowing, oh, I know. I think I know what you need here.
I think I know what you need.
I think I know what you're trying to do. I think I know what might unlock it.
Iowa Lakeside Lab was founded in 1909, making it one of the oldest stations of its type in the country. It was started by Thomas McBride, a professor at the University of Iowa, who felt it was really important for students in biology to get out of the classroom and study nature in nature.
There's all different kinds of wetlands, lakes, there's prairie, there's forest, so there's a variety of places that you can just go visit in one day. You can visit several different wetlands and find different kinds of organisms in each wetland. So it's a perfect place to teach about nature using the outdoors in the classroom.
A major part of or component of the class is doing field projects that are real ecology projects. We go out and we collect data on any number of things and do an analysis of data like an ecologist would, and in some cases students actually write a scientific paper.
You just space out evenly along a 30 or 50 meter line transect and then throw these 50 centimeter by 50 centimeter squares out and then count the species, total those up, identify them. So we're definitely learning a lot.
It's nice to be like in the prairie and learn about it instead of just sitting in the classroom and looking at pictures of flowers or bringing in flowers. So here we just get to really experience it and do our own work to learn it out in the field.
The prairie is the classroom for us. We spend maybe an hour in the morning or a little bit more than an hour in the morning talking about particular topics related to the prairie, and maybe it's the same in the afternoon, and then the rest of the morning and the rest of the afternoon is spent out doing data analysis or just examining different species that occur on the prairie. I call myself a peripatetic teacher because I'm walking while I'm talking and teaching, and it's a little bit different style, but I think it works very well here at Lakeside Lab.
So while I was doing research for this, I found an interview from WNYC in 2004 where you and William Eddings and the Brooklyn Philharmonic did a concert that featured your work and the music inspired by your work, but also music from the hours from that lovely Philip Glass soundtrack. And I just thought it was fascinating because you said in that interview that you actually listened to Philip Glass while you were writing the hours.
I did.
Yeah.
I did. See how things turn around and come around.
That is synchronicity at its finest. Do you listen to music on a regular basis when you write? Or?
I love music. I suppose if I had even a whiff of talent, I would be a musician. But of course, I love language and I love storytelling and I love books. I wouldn't want to say I love music more, but let's say this: if an extraterrestrial arrived on Earth and said, "What can you tell me about what it is to be human?" you would probably play a Bach cantata. You know, it would be more Goldberg variations than Anna Karenina. Just because Anna Karenina, not because it's less great, but because it's local.
Yeah.
It's so steeped in context. It involves language, which our visitor might not be able to read Russian or an English translation. Since I was a kid, music has always mattered to me about as much as books have mattered, not more, but certainly not less. And so I feel like it always sounds a little pretentious to talk about one's early influences, but my early influences feel equally derived from Flaubert and Bob Dylan,
Right.
from Chekhov and Neil Young. Because one of the things you learn from great musicians is, one of the things that's reinforced is the musical qualities of language.
Right.
Maybe you want this paragraph to sound like Subterranean Homesick Blues to whatever extent possible.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
Maybe you want this to sound like Billie Holiday. And there's no way to talk about that really beyond, but it's something you feel, and when you listen to enough music, I find that I hope it finds its way into the rhythms of the sentences that I write.
Right. When I was a kid, I discovered, totally randomly, I discovered Bela Bartok. Okay. Now talk about coming completely out of left field. As someone who, my experience of classical music was doing Mozart etudes, all right? Nothing that really turned me on, but to hear Bela Bartok violin concerto, which, again, this was playing with the medium, just like, we play with the medium in literature. The ways in which classical music, and then, of course, later on with rock and roll and jazz and all the other hip-hop, everything, the way in which artists play with it, it's the exact same thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's the exact same thing. Yeah.
I mean, it's awesome. It's an amazing thing to be able to learn from that and to bring it into the writing. I'm even seeing, I remember being a kid and writing to Bela Bartok and just seeing what comes out,
Yeah.
It's really great.
Well, it's something another thing I talk to my students about. A paragraph read to somebody who doesn't speak English shouldn't sound like nothing at all.
Right.
It should have a force and a momentum, and you must remember that language has musical as well as meaningful aspects, and think about not only the rise and fall of this sentence, but then the next sentence.
Right.
Maybe the next sentence wants to be more staccato because the previous sentence has been long and flowy and baroque and clause riddled.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I don't know if you can get that if you don't. You have to read a lot, and you have to read very widely, reading lots of different writing. And again, we're grateful that we have so many different writers who do so many different things with language. And then, I find some of your work, there's a poetic quality in some parts of your work that demonstrates the attention to language and the importance of sentences. Let me put in a plug again for the workshop. This is one of those things I learned about how important the sentence is, how important a paragraph is. And that people get into fights over that kind of thing.
Absolutely, absolutely.
It's an amazing thing.
It's something actually worth fighting about.
Imagine
that.
I agree.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michael. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
We've just been talking with Michael Cunningham, who's the author of The Hours and several other novels, screenplays, poetry collections, TV series. We look forward to seeing more of his work. He is visiting here at the University of Iowa as Ida Beam Distinguished Visiting Professor. I'm Keisha Lynn. Thank you for joining us from Conversations from the Iowa Writers Workshop.
The preceding program was produced by the University of Iowa in association with the Big Ten Network.